Hi, I'm Chloe.
And I'm Bez.
And this podcast is for graduate teachers in their first 5 years.
We share our own teaching stories as well as advice and ideas we wish we'd had as graduate teachers.
Sometimes funny, sometimes horrifying, but always true.
We want you to thrive and love teaching beyond the dreaded 5-year cliff.
My very first class ever. I remember there was such a big build-up. It was my first year of teaching and I'd started at this school. It was a fairly low SES school with pretty diverse students. And I remember this first class was a Year 9 class. And most of us know that Year 9 is that tough year that you just don't want to face, right? So before I taught this class, one of the teachers at the school came up to me and very kindly was like, "Oh my gosh, we teach this same class. I've heard some really crazy things about them. Let's work together. Here's some tips and tricks." So anyway, I was gearing myself up for this class. And I remember walking in and just feeling so incredibly nervous. And I'd planned to do this name game with them. You know, you go in and there's hundreds of names to learn in that first week, right? So I was like, okay, we'll play this name game where you're you say your name and then something that you like that starts with the same letter. So I went in and I meant to go first and you go around in a circle. And the idea is that when it comes back to me at the end, I have to say everyone's name and what they like. And it's a bit of a competition to see if I can remember everyone's name. So I started, I was like, "Hi, my name's Miss Marie and I like marshmallows." And then the next person goes and they're like, I don't know, for the sake of this, and I won't use students' names, they might be like, "I'm Bob and I like burgers, ha ha ha." And then I have to say, "That's Bob and he likes burgers and I'm Miss Marie and I like marshmallows." And we just keep going. Anyway, it was all going fine until we got to this one student who decided to be a little bit cheeky. And again, I won't say his name, but for the sake of this activity, we will say that his name was Bill. And he was like, "Hi, my name's Bill and I like balls." And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And of course the class start laughing, right? He says that and I'm like, oh no, this is my make or break moment with this class. What do I do? Do I I can't laugh because then I've lost them for the rest of the year, right?
Yeah.
So I was just kind of really, Bill, is that what you want to go with? And he very quickly, thank God, changed his answer and was like, "Basketball. I mean basketball." And then, we continued. But it was just this moment in my head where I was like, oh, my God, this could have gone one or two ways, right? So I guess, my question of the day is, what are your tips and tricks and what are some great tips and tricks for people who are starting the year fresh and having their first class? How do you start off on a good note?
That's a big question.
It is a big question, isn't it? So, I don't know, what's your experience? What are things that you like to do for that first lesson?
First lesson, before I even get in the class, I'm the sort of person where I can't remember a person's name unless I see the name with the face.
Okay, so you need the visual.
Yeah. So every single year, no matter what, and I did it even up until my last year before the class started, I would print off the roll with the student's face and their first name. Obviously, that's really hard if you're teaching Year 7.
Yeah. Because they don't have, half of them don't have pictures, right? Unless they've taken
their primary school.
or orientation photos or something. Yeah.
So that one always helps me. And then I always request them, it's a bit of a sneaky one, but I request that they stay in the same spot for 4 weeks. And I explain to them, I'm like, "I'm really terrible with learning names. Please just sit in the same spot for 4 weeks. I really want to learn your names."
Do you give them a seating plan or do you let them choose where they want to sit for that first lesson?
I let them choose and it's where they're already sitting.
Okay, fair. See, but that's tricky for Year 7s, right? Because they don't know anyone. They might choose to sit with the wrong crowd in that first lesson, right?
That's true. How did you learn students' names?
I was a big fan of games, but I am a little bit visual as well. So I did the whole okay, I'm going to print off their photos and try to memorize things and do that. But then Like I used to just tell my students like, hey, I've got a lot of names to learn. If I mispronounce your name or I get your name wrong, like please tell me because I'd hate to be calling you by the wrong name for half the year. I was like, that's embarrassing for both of us, right? So sometimes I'd go up to students. If I couldn't remember, I'd be like, you know, give me the first letter.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, T. And I'd be like, it's Teresa or whatever. And they were pretty good and it was kind of like fun for them. Sometimes I did name cards as well.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I did that with like some of my more junior kids and I'd get them to write their names on a card. We'd fold it over so it was like a little place card on their table. But I'd get them to draw some pictures or tell me some things about them on the inside. Or one year I had a maths class and I knew most of the kids really hated maths. That's a pretty standard attitude to have in high school. And so, yeah, just kind of like hopes and dreams or fears. And then that gave me a bit of an idea of like where they were at and what I maybe needed to try and work on with them throughout the year. So how long do you reckon it took you to learn everyone's names?
With a full teaching load?
Yep.
Probably, I want to say if it was a smaller class, the best would have been by the end of term 1.
Okay. That's pretty good.
The longest probably at the end of term 2.
Are we talking first year here or are we talking like I've been in the game for a couple of years?
Probably even like in the game for a few years. Especially I found seniors I picked up more easily, but probably because you had more
contact hours, right?
Contact hours.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know, year 7s I always really struggled with. Maybe it's because you haven't seen them in the school before.
Yeah.
There's no photos of them. How long did it take you?
In my first year, I'm pretty sure once the time parent-teacher interviews rolled around, I was really scared I was going to mess up someone's name. So that's like a semester, right? So first year was tough. But I feel like, you know, coming up to like the 6th year, I was like, first couple of weeks, I had names down. Like,
first couple of weeks?
got really good at it. Yeah, got
Wow.
really good at it. But that first year, I was terrible. I was like terrified. I was literally like looking at my run sheet because I had like the order of my interviews. And I was like, oh my God, okay, who's coming up next? Like, please don't mess this up kind of thing. And it was always really tricky as well. Like, you know, seeing them out of uniform.
Yeah.
Like, they look completely different.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I found that tricky.
If they like change their hair or anything, you're just like,
You know, they chuck their piercings back in or whatever it
like,
is.
what is happening?
Right? So anyway, I think we got there in the end and I think, yeah, just practice made it really easy. And then also, like, you know, you get to know the kids in the school, particularly if you're teaching siblings, you tend to, like, remember the siblings a lot easier because you've got that, like, connection.
yeah.
But otherwise, yeah, it's pretty tough.
Siblings is always helpful
I
as
think
well.
so
Once
too.
you make the connection, then you're like, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's, like, stuck in your brain forever. So I'm just thinking then, like, you know, we go through the motions of, like, learning names and, you know, we're trying to not mess up that first interaction with the class. Like, what would your advice be on, like, setting expectations?
Whew.
Yeah.
I think setting expectations is so important, if not one of the most important things that you do at the start of the year. I've definitely made the mistake of not setting expectations or not being consistent with them. And it's really hard once you let things go to pull students back in if you're consistently letting those things go.
Can you tell us a bit about, like, some of those bad experiences? Like, I think that's helpful for people to know, like, what went wrong?
I think probably the most common one was definitely a walkover in the first few years because you're like, oh, I don't want to, like, I'll be nice.
I want to be firm but fair,
Yeah.
right?
And I want them to like me. A really common one is just students talking over you when you're talking, you know, and
Yep.
I did it a lot. I reckon in the first few years, to be honest.
Yeah.
Particularly if they were senior, I think because I was quite young. So I felt the age gap wasn't that far from senior. So
And they think you you're like their friend,
Their friend.
at that point, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah, so it's like, how can you be friendly, but like, well, actually, I'm your teacher.
How do I
not
set the
your friend.
boundary
Yeah.
at the same time? Yeah.
But like if I was teaching and explaining something and two students would be talking, I used to like let that go a lot. But the issue is if you let go of two students speaking, another two is
many
going to
more?
start talking. And so if you then tell the students by the eighth student, if you're like, hey, can you, I'm talking, can you listen while I'm talking?
Oh, but they did it. Yeah.
Right? And then you're like, oh, gosh.
You didn't say anything to them. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that's
That's
they
the most
love that one.
Common one. What about you? What was...
The things that went wrong. Oh man. Okay, so this one was tricky. Like I was a science teacher, right? So I think like science safety is very important, and like setting expectations in the lab was a super big deal for us. And I mean, I don't think anything could have been done on my part in this instance, but I did have some students who were a little bit silly with things like matches and gas taps. The other thing I think I didn't and look, nothing went wrong, thank goodness. Like I was still employed by the school and like nobody was hurt. I'm just going to big disclaimer for everyone. But I did have some students and I like things I don't think I foresaw. Like even though like I did have students who were very like, safety conscious, like so many year sevens don't know how to light a match. Mm-hmm. Like, and then I was just flabbergasted by that. I was like, what do you mean you don't know how to light a match? Oh, we just use those little trigger gun things. And I was like, this is a core life skill. Like, how are you going to light birthday candles or like, it was, I don't know, like light a fire in a fireplace. Anyway, trigger guns was a massive thing. And then, so they didn't tell me that. And then they try to do it. And then their instinct is to just like throw the match when it's done, right? Mm. And they don't realise that because they're just scared. It's just what they do. So, I just think things I didn't foresee was probably my biggest one. The talking one is definitely a massive issue. Though.
What about students late to class? Did you get that with expectations?
Yeah. So, look, I think in the start you everyone follows Bill Rogers and like his expectations and, the thanks instead of asking for things like, with the whole compliance. I remember my students thinking me saying thanks was really odd. And they used to be like, why are you thanking me? I was just like, yep, pop your chair in, thanks. Like, but yeah, the lateness was a big issue in all school sectors that I taught in. But I think it was really just about following through on things that I said that I was going to do. And just outlining that really clearly at the beginning and making sure that if there were consequences for particular actions, it always came back to the core values of the class. So if, someone was late, it was just explaining to them that they're interrupting their own learning. They're also interrupting the learning of the class, and these are the impacts that it has. Therefore, this is the consequence of that. And I think that when students hear that and they realise that it's not an attack on them as a person and that you are being consistent and everyone is being treated fairly, because kids love to be the justice police and they will tell you if you are treating someone very differently to others, then it's okay. But it's tiring. It's so tiring following through, right?
Yeah. Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
The first term is so exhausting because not only are you learning new names, trying to move through the content, but you really have to be consistent on following through with expectations and consequences because if even like for homework and stuff, because if you let that stuff go, it's so hard to pull students.
It's harder to pull it back later. So I think that's like something to remember, right? It's like, okay, let's put the hard yards in now because then we're setting ourselves up for a much easier year.
Would you say that's like the takeaway you wish you knew in your first year of teaching? Or
yeah, I think so. I think that would be it. Like put the hard work in now so that you're not trying to put even more work in later. Yeah. What about you?
I had a mentor and I was in her class and every single class, the first class, she would put up the list of expectations for students. She would explain why, and like you were saying, students love to be justice police. So for students, when they know the reason why, I felt like they were more on board. And then at the end, when she went through list of expectations, reason why, and she'd be like, is that fair? Does that seem fair to you? I mean, most students are like, yeah,
Pretty much.
that's
yeah.
pretty fair.
So were those expectations, were they something that she came up with or were they co-constructed with the class?
They're things that she came up with. And she was like, is there anything else? And
Does
students
anyone dispute to this?
Yeah, pretty much. But what I found interesting was after she went through the students' expectations, she would then ask the class, what are your expectations of me as a teacher?
Yes.
So that really like empowered students because they're like, okay, that's fair. Like if you have expectations of us, we have some of you.
Right.
And they're
that's-
reasonable.
I've done that before and it's so good because, you know, kids will often be like, I want to be able to come and ask you if I need help. Or, you know, I don't want you to make me feel dumb or silly or, I want you to be able to give me a second chance. Like they're things that I felt like often came up for me.
Yeah.
And if a student's not following through on something they're meant to be doing, then you can always come back to be like, hey, here's some expectations that you set from me. And I feel like I am following through on this. Are you following through on yours? Let's like sit and reflect on that. And how can we fix that together?
Yeah.
Have you done something similar?
I've definitely, yeah. I think like even until I finished up teaching, that was sort of, I think it's important to have that dialogue because then it builds respect and trust with the students. But I think even with setting expectations when you show it on the wall, keep it short and sweet, you know?
Yes.
Like you don't want a list of 15. Like I'd probably say at most 5. You can keep it broad, right? At top 5. And then like what you're saying, you can follow up with students, bring it back to those expectations. Be like, remember in the first class we spoke about this.
Yep. You don't want them to be like eye rolling at the expectations.
Exactly.
Like, oh my God, this has taken an hour for us to do it.
To get through. And it shouldn't take an hour.
Hey, Bez,
Yes.
what would you wear on the first day of school? I know, big question.
It really depends on the school that you're at. I would definitely do a Googly search, have a look at the photos that they've posted up of their staff.
Yeah. Staff photos help, right? Yeah.
The first school I was at was not cash,
But a bit more relaxed?
yeah, like you wouldn't want to rock up with,
Like
I don't know, corporate wear.
Okay, but could you wear jeans?
No.
Interesting.
And no, actually, sneakers you could wear after you got comfortable. Actually,
Okay.
no, you couldn't.
Oh, okay. Maybe you got away with it a few
Maybe
times.
I did. Maybe I didn't follow the oh dear. Goes to show I'm probably not the best to answer this.
Okay, so, all right, no jeans, probably no sneakers.
No sneakers.
Okay.
If in doubt, I would go slacks. You can go like a collared shirt. Probably not a cotton t-shirt.
Yeah.
That's probably too cash.
Okay.
But yeah,
So, like, smart casual, but no sneakers, no
that's
jeans.
the word, smart casual. Smart casual.
But you can ask people. Like, I'd be like, oh, you know, what do people wear? Like, find that one teacher who's been there a little while, who's, like, pretty nice and pretty open. And they always have them. It could be your mentor. It could be the person who helps induct everyone. And I just sort of asked them. And I found out pretty quickly that my first school, like, I could wear jeans. It was pretty relaxed. We could wear sneakers.
Really?
Yeah, like, but, you know, you didn't want to dress too provocatively. So, yeah, just being
As in,
mindful
like,
of that. I mean, look, I think it's also
Skin hugging?
you could wear things that were fairly fitted. But I think, I mean, for me personally, being a young female teacher, I also didn't want to have, like, my young male students perceive me in a certain way or, you know, not that any comments that they would make would be warranted, but, you know, you do become really aware of that kind of thing. But yeah, I think I probably dressed up more in the first few days than I did for, like, say, the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Another school I worked at, though, was completely different and the dress code was much more strict. So, like, male teachers in the winter months had to wear suit and tie, like, had to wear a tie.
A tie.
Yeah, that was pretty formal. We, as female teachers, we couldn't wear jeans and things at that school. But, yeah, I just think erring on the side of caution in the beginning and making sure that you're following the rules is fine.
I think dressing conservatively, though, that is a good
It's
tip.
the key. And closed-toe shoes
Yes.
is a must.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And if in doubt, if you can, like, just layer it up. Because, like, you could have a blazer or something, and then if it's a bit more cash, you can take that blazer off.
Yeah.
But if you have layers, you've got options as well, or bringing, like, a large coat. If you,
Yeah, that's great advice.
Here's one.
Go on.
What would you, looking back in that first year,
Yeah.
the pencil case or the packs or the tub box that you brought to class,
Oh, gosh.
looking back, what would you suggest to be included in that tub box or pencil case?
Oh, okay. 100% a million whiteboard markers.
Did you ever steal any?
Absolutely, I did, but don't tell anyone. I bet you did too.
Oh, absolutely. If you left it there, then that was permission to take.
Yeah, I know. And it was always my favourite colours that people would pinch too. I always loved a purple whiteboard marker, and they'd always pinch that one.
Do you feel like the black whiteboard markers always ran out more quickly than the red
Yeah,
ones?
I think they did, but I don't know. There was a certain brand I liked where you could click the end and it would give you more ink.
Oh, yes, I
but
love
they
those
were really
ones.
expensive.
Did you have to buy them?
Yes, but our school would also gift us like a certain amount. But then another school I had worked at, we had a stationery budget, so we could just order stuff, which was incredible. So that's a good question to ask. Is there a stationery budget?
That's
Prob's
true.
not if you're in a government school, but you never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would definitely say whiteboard markers, lots of pens and pencils, because you will have students that do not bring them to class, and always try and keep track of where they are because you won't get them back unless you ask for them back. I used to say to my kids, I remember, because I used to have like a massive pencil case with all these things in it, like, you know, rulers, erasers, like pens, pencils, all different colours. And if a student was like, oh, miss, can I borrow a pen? I'd be like, yep, but it's a boomerang. And they'd be like, what? And I'd be like, it comes back to me. And they were like, oh, ha, ha, ha. And they were generally pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, you had a couple of culprits that you knew.
That would
oh,
take.
I got to chase you
Yeah.
out the door. Otherwise, I'm never seeing that again. But yeah, they're kind of the main things. I think the other thing, particularly in one of my schools that was a lower SES, I'd always bring spare paper to class as well.
That's a
And
great
that's
one.
not really something you can fit in a pencil case, but you'll always have a kid that forgets to bring their book.
Yeah.
So they're just like a couple of things that I'd make sure to have on hand. Yeah.
Stellar.
Were yours any different?
Mine was exactly the same. Definitely lots of whiteboard markers, just hoard as many as you can. I
Yeah.
did like the huge pencil case.
Yep.
And same as you, particularly if you're, I think like when I was working in the government school, probably more so.
Yep.
The pencils, the pens, just have a stash of them. Like just bring a book where you can rip paper out.
Yep.
And that was a really handy tip to learn because students who didn't bring stationery or paper,
Yeah.
the longer it takes for them to get started, the more disrupted the class is. So
completely.
if they know, there's no excuse really. It's like, go grab a pen, go grab a piece of paper.
But I
Then you
suppose
can
if
continue.
we do link back to the expectations that we were talking about earlier, like you don't want your students coming to class completely unprepared all the
This
time.
is true.
So that's where that follow-up comes in, right? Like if it's an expectation that you come to class prepared, you know, what's the process at your school? Is there a behaviour management policy where if they don't show up, then they get a detention, or are they, I don't know, picking up 5 bits of paper off the ground before they leave class? Like, what's the consequence that's going to come into play? Because otherwise, they're just not going to bring things because they're like, oh, I know my teacher's going to bring it.
That's very true.
Like, why would I bring a pen if I know my teacher's going to have a pen for me every time? Like,
Did you ever have that situation in your class?
constantly, particularly in my first couple of years. And then I got a lot better at like reinforcing those expectations.
How did you reinforce that? Like, would you keep them behind after class? Would you? Yeah.
Kind of varied, but I think it came down to what like the school's policy was. So like, you know, it might be you get a lunchtime, or, you know, you get a first warning, and then like your second warning you get a lunchtime, like whatever it is. One of my schools like it actually didn't have detentions at all. So
Okay.
like you'd have to supervise your own detentions. So
Fun.
I know, really fun, and then really hard to make sure they actually show up as well. So yeah, I think it's having a really hard think about, okay, well, what systems do I want to set up before I actually begin with my class that I can actually continue throughout the year?
Yeah.
Like what's actually manageable?
Yeah.
So yeah, having lunchtime detentions on every single day of my week when I also have to do yard duty and try to eat lunch and try to go to the bathroom and then get ready for my next lesson was like not sustainable.
No.
So I'd sometimes do like a once a week sort of situation, or it might be like a phone call home, chat to parents. Do they have the right materials? Even working with a student to organise their locker if I know that they're really disorganised. Like some of my kids had the stuff, they just couldn't find it because they didn't know how to manage, their own systems.
Yeah.
So
even chatting to other teachers too, like seeing if it's only in your class that is happening.
That's handy
or if it's
to know.
consistent across the board.
Yeah.
And then I found if it's consistent across the board, like, obviously
There
there's
might
like
be-
a year level coordinator or wellbeing coordinator.
Yeah, there could
touching
be a big
base with
issue.
them and just seeing, is there anything there that you need to be aware of?
100%.
Because I guess you also don't want to come in hot when there is some context or
100%.
some background.
Yeah, there may
as to
be
why.
students that do need some additional funding to help, maybe the school can purchase some things for them so that they do have a set. Because, you don't want to punish them for something that they have no control over.
Control. Yeah.
Yeah,
But I like that
absolutely.
tip of like doing it like once a week, for example, the lunchtime.
Yeah, I mean, you
detention
just
as
have to be
well.
happy to give up that time. Right?
Yeah. And it comes back to the expectations, term one. Like, you have to be consistent. It's a bit painful in the first term, but then it pays off for the rest of the year. I found a really good tip too is having a look at your timetable and being strategic. Like, if you've got a class before lunch, then
yes.
you could,
You know you can keep them in at lunch,
exactly,
right?
because they're already in the class. So most of the time they don't run off.
I know, and it just sucks when you have them at the end of the day because you legally can't keep
Yes.
them. And they know that too. They
Yeah.
will tell you.
So
and
be
you don't want to be that
strategic.
teacher, right? No one
No.
wants to be that teacher that keeps them after class at the end of the day. I didn't want to be that teacher.
Yeah. No, I didn't either. So, Chloe,
Yeah.
exit ticket for the day. What's your one key takeaway or
Okay.
most important thing you'd want a first year teacher to know?
Okay. I would say at the start of the year, be more firm than you think you need to be, because it's easier to scale back if you need to, but it's really hard to go the other way. And it's okay if your students don't like you, because you're not there to be liked, you're there to be their teacher. Yeah.
Great advice.
What about yours?
Mine would be stay consistent. It will be time consuming and it will take a lot of effort, understandably, on top of a gazillion things that you also have to manage. But if you are consistent for term one, then most likely you can rest easy for the entire year and the students know the expectations.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you found this episode helpful.
If you'd like to share today's podcast with anyone else you think would also find it helpful, please do. And if you've got any ideas on topics you would like us to talk about in the future, please email them through at teacher.hub@edrollo.com.
Catch you next time.